She walked into that room, carrying fresh flowers and a leather folder. Nobody gave her a second look. That was their first mistake. She had done everything right. Pressed blazer, hair neat, white roses and baby's breath. The kind you order when you want a space to feel clean and professional before a big moment. The cameras were already live. 3 of them. One feeding the internal company stream, one going straight to investors watching from different time zones. One sitting quietly in the corner, recording everything for the archive that nobody thinks about until something goes terribly wrong. She stepped forward, hand extended, voice steady. "Welcome to Meridian Capital." The chairman didn't even wait for the new CEO to respond. He turned his head slowly, looked at her hand, looked at the folder, looked at the flowers, and then into his lapel mic, just loud enough for the room to catch it. He said it. "I don't shake hands with support staff." Pause here. Let that land. Because that sentence didn't just dismiss her. It announced something to every single person in that room. It told them exactly how this man saw people. And more importantly, it told 3 cameras exactly who he was. The reaction rippled instantly. A couple of board members smiled. Not big grins. Just those small, tight smiles people give when they want to stay on the right side of power without technically doing anything wrong. Someone halfway down the table let out a short, uncomfortable laugh. The kind of laugh that isn't really funny. It's just nervous energy looking for an exit. And at the back of the room, one of the communication staff literally hid his face behind a folder, as if a folder could erase what was already recorded from 3 different angles. She didn't flinch. She didn't pull her hand back fast. She let the moment breathe. Let the silence sit there just a second longer than comfortable. And the chairman's noticed. His smile tightened just slightly. His eyes moved from her outstretched hand up to her face, like he was trying to figure out if she didn't understand the room or if she simply didn't care. "I'm here as directed," she said, calm, no edge in her voice, no emotion to grab onto. He leaned back in his chair, didn't even try to hide it. "Then stand where you're supposed to. This is an executive meeting." Someone near the far end of the table muttered, just barely above a whisper, awkward, loud enough for a neighbor, loud enough for the nearest mic. She lowered her hand, but on her own time, not because he told her to. Then she placed the flowers down on the table, right in his line of sight, walked to the open seat at the far end of the boardroom and sat down. Nobody stopped her. Nobody asked who she was. Nobody corrected the assumption they had all just made. The laughter faded. The room got quiet, and that quiet felt different now, stretched too thin, like something underneath it was already cracking. "Let's begin," the chairman said, turning to the screen. The first slide appeared. Logo. Date. Meridian Capital. Leadership transition and capital structure update. She leaned back slightly in her chair, and she waited. "Before we go any further, if you believe that where you come from matters less than what you bring to the table, drop a comment. I want to know you're out there. Also tell me where you're watching from. It always surprises me how far these stories travel. This is a fictional story. But the emotions in it, those are very real. Now let's continue." She let the silence stretch a few extra seconds. Then she spoke. "Before we move forward," she said, the same steady voice. Not loud, not rushed. "There's something this room needs to be aware of." The chairman turned slowly. The way people turn when they've already decided the interruption doesn't matter, but want to appear polite about dismissing it. "We don't take floor input during sessions," he said. "You can forward any notes to investor relations after we adjourn." A few heads around the table nodded, relieved. This was familiar. This was how things were supposed to go. Hierarchy restored, order maintained. She met his eyes. "If you refuse to acknowledge my presence in this room," she said, "then by tomorrow morning, $2.3 billion will no longer be part of this transaction." The room didn't explode. It went still. Not the kind of still that means nothing happened. The kind of still that means something just shifted underground and everyone is waiting to feel which direction it moved. Then someone laughed. Too loud. Too quick. "All right," one of the directors said, waving a hand. The universal gesture for, let's not make this bigger than it needs to be. Let's keep this moving. "Professional," someone else added firmly, as if saying the word out loud could make the room professional again. The chairman's smile came back, but thinner now, tighter, less sure of itself. "Take your seat," he said. "We're already behind." "I'm already seated," she replied. A few heads turned. Not every head. But enough. They didn't understand yet what was happening. To most of them, she was still just a problem, a small disruption that needed to be smoothed over so the real work could continue. So they moved forward. That's the part most people never understand about rooms like these. When something uncomfortable shows up, the instinct isn't to confront it. The instinct is to bury it under momentum, move fast enough, and maybe no one has to deal with it. Let's continue, the chairman said, already facing the screen. And the CEO began walking through the numbers, debt schedules, projected cash flow, restructuring timelines, clean slides, confident delivery. A story built entirely on the assumption that everything was already locked in. Nobody asked about the $2.3 billion. Nobody asked who she was. They made a choice. Both of those things. Because asking would mean admitting that something might not be as solid as it looked. If you think a person's job title is the only thing that determines how they deserve to be treated, write true in the comments. If you believe a person's value runs deeper than whatever role they hold, write believe. I'll read every single one. She watched them carefully. The way the chairman nodded along, smooth and steady, as if nothing had been disrupted. The way certain board members settled back in their chairs the moment familiar financial language returned. Percentages, projections, safe numbers that made everything feel under control. New CEO, Daniel Shaw, kept his eyes fixed on the presentation deck, not once looking her way. That wasn't confusion. That was a decision. They had already written the story of this room. She didn't fit the version they'd written, so they kept writing as if she wasn't there. Then the CEO paused mid-slide. Just slightly, but visibly. His eyes moved toward her, then toward the chairman. Before we finalize this section, he said carefully, choosing each word the way you choose your footing on ice, we still need to confirm the primary capital release. The chairman didn't look up. Legal is managing that. Already handled. With respect, the CEO replied, steady, precise. The release requires direct authorization. A pause. The chairman repeated himself. Sharper. From legal. The CEO shook his head once. From the capital controller. That was when the room shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But you could feel it in the way chairs moved. The way pens stopped. The way several sets of eyes traveled. Not toward the screen anymore, but toward her. The chairman followed their gaze. Slower this time. And for the first time since she had walked through that door carrying flowers and a folder, he actually looked at her. Not past her. Not through her, but at her. Trying to reconcile what he had already dismissed with something that was no longer fitting the story. And what exactly are you here representing? He asked. The question still had dismissal in it. But underneath that, something had changed. The certainty was thinner now. She didn't rush her answer. Timing matters more than volume in rooms like this. I'm here for the capital, she said. A few people exchanged glances around the table. The chairman exhaled through his nose. Short, humorless, that's already been handled. Thank you. He turned back to the screen, but the CEO wasn't done. The authorization, he said carefully, that thin thread of tension still holding in his voice, has not been finalized. The chairman's jaw tightened visibly. We've been working through this process for months. Yes, the CEO replied, and the release still requires direct sign-off from the authorized signatory. The silence that followed wasn't asking for clarification. It already understood. A director near the middle of the table leaned forward. You control the full amount? He asked, looking at her. All of it, she said. The CEO nodded once, confirming without repeating. The primary tranche, he added quietly, falls entirely under her authority. The shift was undeniable now. Posture changed, expressions recalibrated. People who hadn't looked at her since she walked in were looking now. Not at the flowers sitting at the edge of the chairman's view, not at the empty seat she had taken without permission. At her. The chairman straightened slowly. Then perhaps, he said, each word deliberate, we should restart this conversation properly. She let that sit for a moment, because what had just changed wasn't her position in that room. It was theirs. They tried to regain control. Of course they did. That's the instinct when something slips. Reset the tone, reframe the moment to pretend the shift was smaller than it was. Let's refocus, the chairman said. Measured now. Careful. We're here to finalize alignment. But alignment requires clarity, and clarity had just arrived in a form nobody had prepared for. The CEO adjusted his papers, buying himself a second. There's one item, he said, that still needs to be formally acknowledged. The chairman didn't look at him. We've covered everything. The conduct provision, the CEO said. That got attention. A director flipped through the printed agreement, scanning, finding the section, reading quietly under his breath. Reputational conduct, capital withdrawal rights. The new CEO leaned forward slightly. What does that actually mean? The CEO answered carefully. It links capital deployment to conduct during the negotiation and closing process. Any documented behavior that materially damages the company's reputation allows for immediate withdrawal. No intent required, only impact and documentation. Another director read further. It doesn't require proof of intent, he added, just facts on record. The chairman waved a hand. Standard language. We include that in most agreements. It was revised, the CEO replied, at the request of the capital provider. At my request, she said. She didn't rush it. She didn't need to. Now every eye in the room was fully on her, including his. You were concerned about optics, the chairman said, studying her differently now, not dismissing, evaluating. I was concerned about behavior, she said. He leaned back. A short, almost involuntary scoff escaped before he caught it. This is becoming a distraction. No, she replied. It's becoming relevant. A director glanced toward the camera in the corner. Red light still on. Recording. No one said it out loud. They didn't need to. Because suddenly the clause wasn't just words buried on page 47 of a contract. It was present. Active. And what had been caught on 3 cameras in the first 10 minutes of this meeting was sitting right alongside it. Short recess, the chairman said, tapping the table lightly. 10 minutes. Then we close this out. Chairs scraped back. Conversations broke out in low tones. People gathered papers they didn't need, checked phones that were already lighting up. Nobody looked at her on the way out. Not out of disrespect this time, out of calculation. She stayed seated for a moment, watching who moved first, who hesitated, who glanced back once, just once, like they were trying to quietly revise their earlier read of the room. Then she stood, took her folder, and walked into the hallway. The air outside was cooler, quieter. 2 directors near the windows cut their conversation the instant they saw her. One gave a small nod. The kind of nod that didn't exist 30 minutes ago. The chairman walked past on his phone, voice low but not low enough. It's posturing, he said. We'll manage it. Same script, still running it. The CEO approached a moment later. Careful. We should speak before we go back in, he said quietly. Not now, she replied. He nodded and stepped back. She moved to a quieter corner near the service elevators. Took out her phone, 1 contact, 1 ring. Yeah, said the voice on the other end. Activate the withdrawal, she said. Effective immediately. A pause. Not confusion. Confirmation. Full amount? Full amount. Code it under conduct during negotiations. Documentation is solid. A brief silence. You're certain? Yes. She put the phone back in her pocket and stood still for a moment, letting it settle rather than rushing back in. When she returned to the room, nothing looked different. Chairs back in place. Water glasses refilled. Conversations humming at a controlled, careful volume. The chairman glanced up as she took her seat. Brief. Like the acknowledgement itself cost something. The presentation resumed. Charts, timelines, projections built on assumptions that were no longer accurate. On this slide, the CEO began, voice steady at first. You can see the liquidity runway based on the Pelion capital commitment. His phone buzzed. He stopped, looked down. Something shifted in his face. Not dramatic. Just a small, visible dimming, the kind that doesn't need explanation. Another buzz. Then another. A quiet chain running around the table. Silence all devices, the chairman said sharply. We're in session. Nobody silenced anything. The CEO was still staring at his screen. Then the next notification hit, and the color visibly left his face. Is there a problem? The chairman asked, irritation rising. The primary tranche, the CEO said, slowly, like the words were reluctant to be spoken, has been withdrawn. The room didn't erupt. It tightened. Withdrawn how? The chairman asked. Executed, the CEO replied. Full amount. 2.3 billion. That's impossible. We're mid-process. We were, the CEO said quietly. Not anymore. Every eye moved. Not to the screen. To her. The chairman stood up. The composure he'd been working to rebuild slipped again. You cannot pull capital like this. We had an agreement. There was a clause, she said. This is an overreaction. No, she said. The room didn't explode. It unraveled, quietly, procedurally, the way things actually fall apart in rooms like this, not shouting, not slammed doors. Just motions, seconded. Documentation requested. Language that sounds neutral but hits hard when applied correctly. Phones started ringing outside. Analysts reacting to numbers they didn't have context for. Pre-market indicators moving. The lead independent director spoke. Calm. Final. We are obligated to address governance. Now. The chairman looked around the table for support, for alignment, for someone to slow it down. Nobody moved for him. By the afternoon, the headline was already written. Analysts debated whether it was extreme. It wasn't extreme. It was precise. And later, a message came in from Daniel Shaw. I should have said something. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she typed back. You had the moment. You chose not to use it. No anger. Just clarity. Because real power doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it carries flowers into a boardroom, sits quietly at the far end of the table, and waits to see how it gets treated. And sometimes, the cost of getting that wrong is more than anyone in the room can afford. If you were in her position, would you walk away? Comment yes if you would. Comment no if you'd stay and keep fighting from inside. Or share what you'd do differently. I genuinely want to hear it. Your answer might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. If this story hit differently, subscribe, share it, drop a comment, and pass it forward. You might be the reason someone finally finds the courage they've been looking for